Okay, folks, it's 6 o'clock. I'm told it's one of the hottest days of the year, which is likely true. It is Tuesday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. We're in the council chambers for the city of Platteville, and I am calling the regularly scheduled meeting to order. Candace will start with roll call.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Kathy Kopp.
Here.
Jason Arts.
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Todd Casper is excused. Bob Gates.
Here.
I'm trying to get back to the agenda, which seems to have disappeared off my computer. But before I start that, I would point out that there are cooling centers in the city of Platteville for anybody who's watching tonight and may not know that. The city hall, there's a cooling center, the police department, and the library. My understanding is that if you needed a cooling center 24/7, it would be the police department, and our chief is over there waving his hand. I don't know that he's hoping for visitors, but please know that if you need it, there is a place to go. And I thank the Platteville Journal. Steve tells me that this week's edition will also be carrying a listing of the cooling centers in the city. The first thing then on our real agenda is consideration of the consent agenda. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Let me know if you want a separate discussion on any item. And there are quite a few. First of all, we have the council minutes from August 8th, the regular meeting, payment of bills, appointments to boards and commissions. And tonight I'm appointing Danica Larson to the Safe Routes Committee. Licenses, we have temporary Class B to serve fermented malt beverages, Platteville JC's at Legion Park. This would be for the Dairy Days event, Friday, September 8th to Sunday, September 10th. St. Mary's Catholic Church on Sunday, September 24th for their annual St. Mary's Parish. That event will be at the Broski Center. Roundtree Gallery on Friday, September 1 in their facility for an artist reception. Roundtree Gallery on Friday, September 6th, again at their facility on Main Street for the Kindred Spirits art reception. Another on Sunday, November 26th to Roundtree Gallery for Artist Sunday, again at their facility. And then on Friday, December 8th, at the Roundtree Gallery for the Teeny Tiny Bold Artist Reception. We have 1- and 2-year operator licenses to sell and serve alcohol as presented in the packet. Class B beer license to Gary 2 Limited, Platteville, Wisconsin, Trent Fleege agent for the premises at 245 US 151 Business Suite 200 for the back 9. For those people who don't know where that is, it would be between be next to Baskin Robbins, and between Baskin Robbins and Dunkin' Donuts, or someplace down in, at least in that area. And this is the back 9 is a golf simulator activity. There are permits, a parade permit for the Dairy Days Parade on Saturday, September 9, which starts at 9:30. Street closings, Hickory Street between West Pine and Greenwood for the St. Augie's Block Party on Wednesday, September 6th. Main Street between 2nd and Oak for the Pyro Picnic event on Saturday, September 16th. This is sponsored by the Underground. Those are the items on the consent agenda.
Consent agenda is printed.
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Lynn to approve the consent agenda as printed. Candace will vote.
Killian.
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Kopp.
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Parrott. Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item on our agenda are citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. I have one person who has asked to speak. That would be the executive director of the Main Street program, Michael Walsh. who's going to talk about the Main Street Program Annual Report.
Okay, Michael Walsh, 435 West Madison Street here in Platteville. As noted, I'm the executive director of the Platteville Main Street Program. What I handed out to you was our annual report for 2022-2023, which ended June 30th. And I just wanted to go over a few of the notes on what has occurred over the last year. First of all, traffic down on Main Street has increased 17% over the previous year, with average traffic of 8,000 people per week. With cooperation of many organizations, Main Street hosted 44 events, including the pub crawl, music in the park, Southwest Music Festival, car cruise, Pride in the Park, chalk and cheese, and many veterans programs, all of which have grown in popularity. We supported the development of the Updraft Brewery, which is a wonderful addition to our district. We recently completed the fire mural and have committed to making Main Street a focal destination of future artistic projects. The farmers market and community gardens are going strong and expanding. And businesses are receiving services and training through the Wisconsin Main Street Program in conjunction with the Platteville Main Street Program. Close to $30,000 in free services were given over the last year to 17 businesses. Our social media presence has increased and more people are learning about the Main Street businesses and the products and services that we have to offer. And I'd say going forward, my plan would be to continue the path that we've been going down over the last year as far as growth goes, making sure that a lot of our businesses down on Main Street, people know who they are and what services they provide. And then working with all the entities within Platteville, including the city and any other organizations in a cooperative and partnership so we can grow together. Any questions of me?
Questions of Michael? Michael, it's always great to see that we have so many storefronts full on Main Street. That's not necessarily the case when you go to other
Definitely true.
locations.
I have one question. How do you gauge, that the traffic that goes? That's right, you use to gauge that. Like,
We use geofencing data.
okay.
So anybody that has a cell phone in their pocket and they go down Main Street, that tracks it. Quite honestly, that's how we track visitors down on Main. And we do every project or any program that we have on Main Street, we use that data to be able to understand if it's growth, if it's declining, the demographics of the people that are coming there. So yeah, that's what we use.
So that's something that new to, I mean, did you bring that in? I never.
It was implemented upon my arrival, more or less. It's been here, but I've gotten into actually developing and using the information to be able to help out anybody who's having a program to find out if there's growth or not.
I appreciate that above and beyond. Thank you.
It's kind of scary.
A little bit. Okay, nothing else. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, there are several reports in the packet. There's the Parks, Forestry and Recreation Committee minutes from May and June. Jason, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Museum Board, Bob, have you gone to your first meeting?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, and Historic Preservation Commission, Ken?
No additions.
Okay, then we're ready to move into the action items on our agenda. The first is ordinance 2308, amending chapter 4514, which is the city cemetery ordinance. And I believe that is you, Howard.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yes, thank you. Currently, the municipal code reads that fees and charges will be paid within 5 days after a burial. Most other cemeteries in the area require payment up front. We've had at least one funeral home that has been in arrears for at different times. That one funeral home was now paid up very recently. But we still believe that we should ask that the fees be paid in advance effective September 1st. So we're recommending approval of the ordinance.
Okay, anybody with questions? This would ask for payment at the time of service. Basically,
Yes.
any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve ordinance 2308, city cemeteries.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Bob to approve ordinance 2308, city cemeteries. Candace will vote.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes,
Cop.
she said yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Arts,
Yes.
Parrot, Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item for action on our agenda is resolution 2324, City of Platteville fee schedule.
So that will be me. So every year annually, the staff reviews the fees charged by the city of Platteville for various items such as license, permits, inspections, programming, etc. The following suggested changes to the current fee schedule, which we would look to implement those not until the beginning of 2024. So first is page 2 to the administration. There's just a few minor changes to the language in the public records section and the elimination of an outdated fee that is no longer used. Page 6, EMS and the ambulance records, these are eliminated. This section has been removed as these are past the retention period and no longer need them or no longer have them. Page 12, Park and Rec, they increased of tier number 3 to $60 for residents and $80 for non-residents. And then page 13, Planning and Development, just the elimination of a subdivision land dedication as this was deleted from the ordinance.
Okay, questions on the fee schedule? Schedule. Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve resolution 2324, excuse me, amending the city of Platteville fee schedule for 2024.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend the fee schedule as requested. We'll vote.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts.
Yeah.
Parrot,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda then is the award of contract 7-23. This would be relative to street maintenance.
Yes. This is our annual project to do thin overlays on selected streets using the estimated $110,000 in wheel tax funding. This would be our 3/4 inch overlay. We had one bid from Iverson Construction. I've included a spreadsheet and a map. The proposed streets would come in under budget at $104,132.84. And so staff is recommending award of the contract.
Okay, questions on street maintenance request?
I have one question. Do they grind off any part of the street, a portion of the street before they put down the overlay?
They do a small portion at the butt ends of the street so that we don't feather it out so that there's a full amount, but that's usually all that they do.
Take anything off the ground?
No.
Of a thin overlay. Yeah, thin overlay.
Oh, It's 7 to 10 years, depending on the underlying condition of the street itself.
Okay, any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Move to award contract 723 street maintenance to Iverson Construction for the proposed streets for thin overlay in the amount of $104,132.84.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Kathy to approve contract 7-23, which is street maintenance. Noting that these funds actually are available from our wheel tax monies. And this is an amount of $104,000 and change. We'll vote.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the next item is award of contract 8-23 for highway painting. Again, Howard.
Yes, thank you. We do annual painting of center lines and other markings on highways. This year, our intent is to repaint Water Street from Madison to Northside Drive, including the roundabout at Madison Street. Northside Drive is the dividing line for the city's city and state jurisdiction and maintenance. The street was originally painted in 2012. Normally it lasts 5 to 7 years. We would be repainting. We have one alternate bid to paint crosswalks on the side streets, Case Pit, Fairfield, Northside Drive. We received a bid from one firm, Century Fence. They've done it before. The base bid came in. There was a little discrepancy in the numbers. It was in their original bid. The base bid was $25,055.40, including alternate A, it would be $30,055.40. Last night at the Community Safe Routes Committee, the Safe Routes Committee asked that we look at changing the painting for the crosswalks going across Water Street from the current just two parallel lines to what we call a high visibility crosswalk that has the diagonals through them. I did speak with Century Fence and they said that it would cost less than $1,000 to do those diagonals through those for those three. Because we were under budget on the last one, I think that we would be able to do this one. If you would agree with that, I would recommend that the motion say up to $31,055.40, including high visibility crosswalks.
Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? I think that's probably a good idea. Okay, do I hear a motion?
I move to award contract 823 highway painting with alternate A to Century Fence at the bid price of $31,055.40, including the diagonal crosswalks, with the overage absorbed in the CIP budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Bob and a second by Ken to award contract 823 for highway painting with the alternate and also to include high visibility crosswalks. Candace will vote.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Cop, Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that ends the action items on our agenda tonight. We have several information and discussion items, which may take a little bit longer than the action items. So the first of those is the 2024-2028 Comprehensive Capital Improvement Plan. Nicola.
Thank you. Hopefully you all have a copy of the plan in your packet or separately, depending on how you received it. And so just to give you a review of the plan. I'm starting out with the fact that you may be aware, if you've been here for a while, that in 2021, a new comprehensive approach to planning for capital improvements was introduced for the city of Platteville. And this new comprehensive approach sought to capture a broad spectrum of potential projects, from those that are mandated or immediately needed for delivery of essential services to those which would improve or expand service delivery to new programs or services that would enhance the city as a whole. The comprehensive approach enables both you, the council, and us as directors, and all of Platteville, taxpayers and residents, to see and discuss projects that should or could be funded over the next 5 years. And it also forms the foundation for developing the upcoming capital improvement budget. But just to emphasize, this is a comprehensive plan, but does not equate to the budget for the capital improvements. So the resulting document is a tool which assists us in planning for our capital improvement spending and also keeps citizens informed on current needs and also future potential projects. It helps to capture community support for those projects when people can see them coming in advance. And it can be very helpful in obtaining grant support. We can submit this when we are requesting for grants. And it's certainly seen favorably by our credit rating agency, S&P, when they are considering our debt issues and issuing their rating for our debt issues. So I wanted to let you know that we have made some updates and enhancements to the plan since last year, not just new financial information in the plan, but we've also tweaked a little bit. Probably one of the largest changes we've made is to reverse the order of priority. So you may remember that in previous years, the most immediate need was a number 5. And we've now reversed that. So the number 1 priority is the thing that is most urgently needed as quantified by the department directors. And so you'll see on the detail sheets that those priorities are indicated, and I can review that when we get a little further in here. And I just wanted to, recognize that we can always count on being presented with more needs and opportunities than it is feasible to fund. And so that is the nature of budgeting when we get to that point, both for capital projects as well as for operating budgets, that we have that opportunity or that advantage of having lots of worthy causes, projects, and expenditures that we need to choose between in order to have a budget that balances. And so the capital improvement plan is not immune to those choices. So let's dig in. So if you flip over to the beyond the title page to the first page, and I'm just going to review with you some of the summary here. So to be refreshing ourselves, a definition of a capital improvement or a capital project, any item that is expected to have a useful life of of 3 years or more, and a cost that is greater than $10,000. Any kind of one-time project that is under $10,000 will generally be included in the operating budget under outlay. And so we have a line item in all the operating budgets for those kinds of items. But if it's over 10,000 and 3 years or more of life, it will be in the capital improvement budget. And the examples of some improvements would be, of course, infrastructure such as roads and buildings, equipment such as snowplows and mowers, wastewater treatment plant improvements, and planning documents. We undergo plans sometimes so we can have a full understanding of what we might need to do with a particular building or in a particular area. The city's goal is generally to cover equipment maintenance costs and equipment replacement through tax levy and other revenue sources. And we typically use our borrowing power for replacement of infrastructure or creation of new infrastructure.
Nicola,
Yes,
do you have this so that it can be projected for our audience?
I do not. No, it's really too large of a document to put into this. The numbers would get really, really tiny, and it would be difficult to see on a presentation, I believe. Okay. So, so we typically use our borrowing for those larger infrastructure items. And just to let you know that I'm very grateful to the department directors who were very instrumental in getting this thing put together. We did not have the advantage of an intern this year to work on it. And so every director got up to their elbows in a very large Excel worksheet and were able to update their projects. And so thank you to the directors. And then also I met with the city manager with each director to review the projects as well. So if you go to the second page, which is actually number 3, here you'll see a summary of the funds and how the items are being funded and by department for the uses of those funds. And I wanted to let you know that this plan is still being developed as a tool. So one of the things that we struggle with a little bit is how to incorporate the streets that we would like to do while being realistic about what we can actually fund. So in this edition of the plan, you'll see that the street projects that have been included under the years 24, 25, and 26 are pretty much sized to be what we feel is within reach from a funding perspective. Certainly not set in stone, but we've attempted to size those items within those years to be somewhat realistic. But street projects that were outside of this sizing have been pushed to the years 2027 and 2028. So you'll see as we get further in that those years are oversized in terms of what is realistic to be funded. You'll also be relieved, I think, to hear that I'm not planning to walk through each project individually because we might be here for the rest of the night. But I would like to review with you the summary information here and for the departments and some of the charts that are included as well. Overall, as you go back through this at your leisure, you'll find that the summary pages for each department have a project name and a project number. And that number corresponds to the number on the detail pages. So we'll get there in a little bit, but essentially that's how you can navigate back and forth to find details about a project that you might see on one of the department's summary pages. We also hope to be able to add some links to the PDF version of this document, which will help with navigation before the next meeting. It is extremely time consuming, I must add, though. There's no easy way to do that. Okay, so just to walk through this summary of funds, the top half of this table shows you the funding sources. And you can see the first item is the capital projects levy. Now, this number includes new tax dollars projected for whichever year that we're looking at. So for 2024, you see the number is $2,075,000. But it also includes funding from reserves, which represent tax dollars from previous years. So that line item is both the reserves and new tax dollars. And for context, historically, we have funded about $650,000 to $800,000 in this line item. So you can see that with over $2 million in opportunities identified to be funded through capital projects levy, that is where we'll get into that budget process a little later in the year. I will have to identify what can be realistically funded out of the capital projects levy line item to get closer to that, $800,000 target range. Okay, any questions so far?
Are we all caught up where we are? Ken, you have questions?
Have you gone through the two diagrams?
Not yet. I'm still on page 3, which is the summary of funds.
Is the page 3, is that correct in my document here? Page 2, page 3?
This is page 3.
Okay,
So that's what she's been talking about.
yep.
Are we, because when I looked in the packet, I printed my version from the packet. I thought the pages were corresponding. Are we good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, great. I didn't want to keep referencing a page number that you didn't have.
So
All
you're
right,
saying
so-
right now that in the summary of funds, that at this point in time, capital projects levy says 2,075,000, but that's way more than, I mean,
Then we would realistically be able to fund from tax dollars. Yes. But again, this is a comprehensive plan, and it's, has a lot of opportunities. Some are immediate needs, some are not so urgent. And so as we go through the budget process, we will have to refine the plan to yield a budget for 2024. But this is a starting point, and it is a helpful document in that it provides us with a scope and context for all of the opportunities that are out there. So the next line item is general obligation bonds. And then just as a refresh, and you're going to hear this quite a bit over the coming months, but we have an externally and internally imposed debt limit. The externally imposed is by the state, by state statute, and that is 5% of equalized value. And we also have our own internal debt limit of 3.5% of equalized value. And so GO bonds count towards that total debt limit. And then they have to be repaid, of course, and those repayments are budgeted in the debt service fund.
and it's been our practice in recent years not to take on more debt than we're retiring.
That is correct.
And
We have,
so
we had a pinch that we went through as a city with our debt obligations. And so in response to that, we have a policy that is not written, but it's an informal policy that we will endeavor to borrow only the levy supported principal that's paid off the previous year. Yep. So the next line item is grants. So that's pretty obvious, federal, state, local, or private grants. Grants are usually awarded, and they are specified for use and restricted for use. And then donations, fundraising and other kinds of donations that we might receive as a city. And then a category called other sources. And that would be, an example would be the wheel tax falls under other sources, or external funds such as the library foundation or one of the museum funds that is not held by the city, or TIF district funding if a project is within the project plan for a TIF district. And then you see also we have water and sewer revenue bonds, and those would also fund large infrastructure type projects to maintain our water and sewer infrastructure. And the difference between those and the GO bonds is these do not count towards our debt limit, because they are what's called revenue bonds, and they are guaranteed by the revenue stream that comes from the utility. Okay, so those are our sources. Before I go on to uses, any other questions about sources of funding?
I guess I have a question on how do you figure estimates for things like grants and donations?
Well, that's a great question. I think we'd have to look at individual projects and talk to the director as to, perhaps sometimes there's a grant that may be recurring in nature, and so it's understood what the size might be. You can see that in 2024, there's a very large amount of grants identified there, 7,170,208. And the 7 million part of that you probably are all aware of, which is the federal appropriation as funded through the USDA for the fire station.
So like in 2028, the $12 million in grants, that's based on what the directors are expecting to get for grants they've already applied for.
Not necessarily. And if you want as an exercise, we could go and investigate that real quick. Would you like to do that?
Well,
So
I don't.
it won't take just a
take
minute, and
time.
it'll
I
help to
just-
show you how to navigate in the. So let's say we had that question, you said in 2028, so it's 12 million. So I'm gonna cheat here and scroll through the departments, and I can, is it yours? Okay.
It's mine.
Yeah, so it's under Public Works. So if you flip to page 11, you will see there that this page 11 shows you the summary of funding sources for Public Works.
Okay,
And then on the right-hand side there, under 2028, you see that there's 12,147,000. So now if we go to the next page, we'll see a list of the first page of projects. But if we look under 2028, there's no 12 million there. So we have to go to the next page. And it's still no 12 million under 2028. So we're going to have to go to the third page. And now we see a big project there, Water Street construction. It's project number 94, and it has a $13 million price tag. So we have to deduce that that is where that 12 million is coming from. And so to get more information, we could flip to page number 94. And there oh, that did not work. Oh no, it's project number 94, my bad, thank you. Project number 94. So if you look at the top left-hand corner of the detail pages, that's where you'll find the project number. So it's actually on page 117, project number 94 on page 117. And there you can see a little bit of a description of this Water Street project. And you can see there that it's anticipated that we would get a grant for $10,400,000 and that we would fund the rest through bond proceeds. Now, Howard could explain a little bit more about how that number is derived for the potential for a grant.
At this point, it's more of a wish than anything else. I'm trying to work with DOT to see whether or not they would be willing to do some of that work for us, but we're still, that's what I'm hoping, because otherwise we're not going to be able to afford it.
thank you for the explanation.
Okay, so that was sort of a recap of the funding sources. And now below that on the summary page, so I'm back to page 3 in the capital improvement plan. And so now you just see that each department is summarized by year in terms of the projects that they have included in the plan. Okay, so moving through these graphs and charts briefly. So the first one on page 4 is a summarization in graphical form of the funding sources. And just to pull out a couple of things here, you can see that the green area represents grants, and you can see that that is the largest funding source for the plan in 2024 in the bar. And that's, of course, because of the 7 million federal appropriation. And then if we look at 2027 and 2028, you can see that there's a large amount of red, which represents the GO bonds. And that's because, as we talked about earlier, we had to push out into those later years some of the streets in order for us to have a more realistic view for the next 3 years. And so all those streets would be funded through bonds. And so that makes that category look larger. And then also the 12 million that you just asked about is represented by the green in that last bar all the way over to the right. Okay, and then the next page is another bar chart representing the uses by department. And here you can see in the red, fire engine red, we have that largest use is for a large project. It's currently in the plan at 12.5 million. And so that's why that takes up most of that bar in 2024. And then again, when we look out to 27 and 28, we see that the uses are dominated by public works because we pushed those streets out that way. And then just a review of the next two pie charts are just showing you 2024. And once again, you know, for us, for the city of Platteville, the fire station project is a very large project. You can see it represented by most of those GO bonds and by the green section, which is the grants, which takes up more than half of the pie chart. And then uses again, you know, the fire department is taking up most of that pie chart on page 7 because that will represent the largest portion of our CIP budget in 2024. Any questions on the charts? Okay. So I'm just going to whiz through the departments just so you get a feel for this, and then we can pretty much call it a day. So on page 8, you have the administration department, and you can see represented there the funding sources and the projects listed underneath. And you can see the numbers to the right-hand side of the project name, which represents the number of the project, which corresponds to the detail pages. And then the next is community development. And then on page 10 is the police department. And on page 11 is the first part of public works. So this is the funding sources for public works. And then on pages 12, 13, and 14 are the actual projects themselves. And then on page 15 is water and sewer. And that is just the first part of the actual projects. And then 16 and 17 continue the projects themselves. And then on page 18 is parks and recreation. 19 is library. 20 is museum. 21 is fire department. There you can see the 12.5 million down below, project number 201. And up above, you can see the funding sources are $3 million of GO bonds, $7,005,000 of grants, donations estimated at $1,507,500, and other sources of $1 million. And that some of those numbers include for other projects that are listed for 2024 as well. On page 22 is the taxi bus, and on page 23 is the city contribution towards capital projects and the airport match for those projects at the airport. All right. Oh, just one more thing. At the very end of the document, there is a list of deferred streets from 2022 to 2029, which is provided for your information. And if you have any questions on that page, Howard would be glad to help you. If you have any questions on the detail pages, feel free to ask now or reach out to department directors in the upcoming couple of weeks. And this will come back for action at the next meeting.
So I do have a question.
Yes.
On my desk, I have the 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan. Is
Okay.
there a way for me to know what has not been carried forward into the current plan and what has been added that wasn't in the previous plan? Because I'm not sure how to go from what we approved just a year ago to this new plan.
There is not a way, I can tell you that nothing has been eliminated that I can recall. Directors themselves may remember if there was a project that didn't get completed, but also got eliminated. But I can't think of one. We did have a project from I don't think it was in that plan, but it might have been in the plan before that one that did not get funded and did end up being deleted from the 23 plan, I believe. And that is the parking lot for Pine Street. And so we are planning to include that before the next meeting in the comprehensive plan because it unintentionally was eliminated from last year's plan.
It would be helpful in future plans that if things are added, they're added color coded or something, because
Sure.
I mean, you know, I understand that this is a plan. But I also think it's important to understand the difference between last year's plan and this year's plan.
Yeah, I think we can add that without too much difficulty to future plans.
It's going to take me a while now to go back and look.
Again, you know, individual directors have a very, I don't know what quite the adjective to use, but they're very deeply invested in the projects that they have asked for. They spend a lot of time putting those pages together and the descriptions, thinking about what they need, not just for next year, but for 5 years out. And so I think you could reach out to department directors and ask, you know, if they've added, you know, what projects they actually added. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot, so I don't have that, you know, firsthand knowledge of each department.
You know, because last year we spent considerable time going through this, kind of like page by page.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that you wanted to do that.
No, I
this
don't want
year.
to do that. I only want to look at the pages I haven't seen.
Right.
But if you don't give me some idea of the pages I haven't seen, it's difficult for me to know that.
Well, I think are the project numbers the same? Would be a same carryover project number from?
They are not. We sometimes things have, for example, with the streets. First of all, last year was unusual because we had some potential funding for streets, BIL awards and things that we had to kind of plan for, but then didn't come to fruition. And that meant that the detail pages for those projects had to be updated to reflect funding by the city instead of funding from a grant. It also meant that we had to move priorities around to try to group things in a way that made sense from a funding standpoint. So the project numbers would not make sense if we kept them with each project each year, I think.
She's talking about if the department head could probably make those reflections for her, because even in if she looks back and goes over and numbers have changed, you know, everything is new. And
Yeah, I think
a lot of work. That was a lot of time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I believe that we will endeavor to create the plan this year. I'll reach out to the department directors and ask them if they can identify which projects were new for this year, and I can color code those on the summary pages so that you can see which ones are new.
That'd be good. I mean, not only for me, but for everyone.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so this will go on the agenda at the September, I think it's 13th, 12th,
I believe.
yeah, 12th meeting for potential action. If you have questions on any project before then, on any proposal before then, you can. Again, this is a plan. It is not the budget. Very important to understand the difference between a plan and a budget. Okay. Let's go to our next agenda item then. Howard, the award of the DOT and the DNR trail grants. This is good news.
Yes. One is as much of an announcement as anything else, with a lot of assistance from grant writer Angie Wright. We submitted multiple applications for DOT, what they call STARS grants, surface transportation alternatives for rural schools, to provide up to 80% of the cost for 4 different pieces of the trail that extends, it's a gravel trail from the current paved Roundtree Branch Trail all the way up to Fairfield Drive behind the high school. Phase 1 starting at the south, all the way up to the top end. These were submitted in March, and in June, we received a letter awarding us up to just under 407,000 for phase 1. Concurrently, also with the assistance from Angie Wright, we submitted applications to the DNR for stewardship grants for the same 4 project phases. These were submitted in May, and just recently on August 15th, we received the letter awarding us up to 131,723 for phase 1. Between these 2 grants, the city does need to budget $30,000 from city funds to provide half of the design costs. We did provide resolutions of support back in the spring. We need to submit a signed agreement by September 15th for the DOT award, and DNR is requesting we inform them as soon as possible if we intend to decline the grant. So total project cost is over $568,000. And in order to get 530,000 some, we would need to provide $30,000, a little over 5% match. So I don't intend to bring this up again unless the council wishes to have a second vote, a new vote on this. This is basically what we had talked about and what we had intended back in the spring, that we would only accept these grants if we were getting both grants. So I think we're very fortunate in getting both of them. And, unless, like I say, unless you have objections, we're going to go forward.
I don't have an objection, but question about the city's share of that 30,000.
2024, correct?
And so that when we get to budget, that would automatically be at the top of the list, correct?
Yes, that was in the long 3 pages of my list there. Yes.
Any other questions? Otherwise, that's good news that we got both grants. I remember last year we got just the DNR grant. It was very small. We couldn't really come up with the rest of the money. So this is great news. And I don't think you need, from looking at council people, I don't think you need to bring it back next time. Okay, the next item then on our agenda is the fire facility concepts. Clint.
Good afternoon. I guess good evening here. We're going to have a little bit of a presentation here. I think we've got more slides than you probably want to see tonight, but it is quite a lengthy project. Warning, the slides do get pretty busy. Some of the print gets pretty small. I think that you folks have screens up here at the front where you're able to follow along on some of the smaller details. And by all means, you can stop me as I go. As you're well familiar, we're in the midst of a fire station project, as we talked about with our CIP planning. And we're at a position of trying to decide on a concept. As you know, we're partners with the different townships. We also have partners with our capital campaign group that is helping us gain revenues. And we're trying to arrive at a concept on essentially answering some big questions of what shape the facility is going to be, what location it's going to be built on, and how it's going to be kind of positioned in some of those big broad things so that we can take that on to the architect for a refined design. Was there a question that you had, Ken?
Yes, I have a question about this whole document. My question is this being presented to somebody beyond us and the citizens of Platteville? Is this a document to be sent in?
Sent.
I'm not sure what you mean by sent in, sir.
Well, is it gonna go to somebody? Are we just looking at this and this is what you and Ryan Simmons have come up with? What about the other people here that provide information on this as far as the
That's the whole intent is to give everybody a rundown. We plan on presenting this to yourselves and then off to the different townships. And then also to our fundraising folks so that they all have kind of a history presented to them, as well as the different four main concepts and the alternates, so that we can judge their preference on what concept that they would like.
That's what I want to find out as to where it's going. If it is just going here and staying, that's it.
The answer to that is no.
Or it's going beyond.
Beyond would be the correct answer, sir. Okay, so the main gist of, can I advance a slide here? I press a button. No, maybe up, down. Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay, so again, the main concept and the purpose of this exchange is to get our partners all to kind of gauge their preference on what shape the station will be, where the location that it will be built on, how will it be relatively positioned on that site, consideration for some of the alternate features that are desired for the station, as well as getting an estimate cost point that's acceptable to continue planning. Because again, we're trying to arrive at broad stroke concepts. And so just a thing to kind of keep in mind is we're trying to almost arrive at a scorecard that's going to have our four options there on top that you see in the two alternates, and wanting to get an understanding of our partners. Do they recommend that option? Do they perhaps support that option, or do they oppose that option? And so the, come on now. We've kind of got the presentation here broke down into 5 main sections that we'll go through. We'll capture a quick background and history, concept development, initial presentation, options for consideration, and then the decision points that are going to be asked of the partners. As a background, as many of you were here at the onset, roughly in the third quarter of 2020, we launched a study with Public Administration Associates and our folks with 5 Bugles Wendell, and kicked off a study assessing our current facility and needs of the department in a timeline that roughly looked like this. When that presentation came back to the city council, what was discovered with a study on the current station is that we identified the following problems or limitations, if you will. We knew that we had envelope repair, tuck points and sealants and windows and replacements with a facility that's 60 years old. We identified inadequate parking. There is some responder parking. Public parking is mostly on streets, and even responder parking is on streets. Apparatus bay is significantly undersized. Again, we had vehicles parked on the outside. The inside of the station lacks air ventilation, exhaust removal system, etc. There is no room for real types of growth on that parcel. The entryway is not very welcoming to guests as you come in, and you have a stairwell. So there's, if you're have limited mobility, it's a challenge to navigate in the building. There's no vestibule for climate control, as well as the roof leaks. Also, there's limited personal decontamination areas with laundry and showers. There's no gear turnout locker room. And then also we identified that we would also like to see different spaces, like if it would be optimal to have a study space, gender equitable toilets and showers, gender equitable dorms, privacy mother rooms, as well as administrative spaces. In that study, we also identified some of the non-compliance that we have with different code compliant, ADA compliant, as well as identifying that we do have asbestos. And in the places that it's at, it's fine if we don't touch it. But of course, if we do any types of renovations or maneuvering around it, then we have to have an abatement plan in place. So overall, what we assessed on our 60-year-old station is that the positives is that it was in a good location as compared to our fire district and where our responses and our volunteers, et cetera, were. It has a meeting room, which is nice, as well as museum space. But the negatives kind of came to light with safety and lacking modern safety features and space for best practice. Apparatus floor, again, is small, cleaning and decon, office space, turnout gear, public entrance and parking, as well as overnight accommodations. So overall, the study led to a recommendation to begin kind of assessing our possibly a new facility. But as we talked about in this previous slide with the location, the study also showed us a mapping of where our volunteer responders are in relationship to the station. So you'll see there's little tiny itty bitty orange and dots on there that are indicators of where the home residences are of our volunteers responding in to calls. Everything in the blue section is about a 5-minute response. You get out into the yellow sections, you're at a 10 minutes response, and out into the green is a 15-minute response for our volunteers, again, reporting into the station. A study was also done then on the mileage out from the station at its current location. Again, the green is a 1.5 mile response out, and a pink is a 5 mile response out, and everything kind of then beyond that is beyond a 5 mile road distance. Later into the project, we also started to ask the questions then as we considered placement or continued to consider placement of fire station is where are our responses at? And so a recent plot graph that was put together us through our partners, the Southwest Regional Planning Commission, who does our GIS work. Chief sent them the addresses of our responses in 2022 to put on an overlay map. And this is kind of an expanded area. It's probably beyond our fire district itself. And this is kind of capturing then mutual aid responses. But you'll see all the little black dots there show where our firefighters reported to calls.
Not necessarily fires, just.
Correct. Yes, very much so. Yes, not necessarily fires, but to responses. The next map that we're going to show then is going to kind of narrow in onto city center, kind of a mapping where a majority of the responses were to. And this map gets very, very, very tiny, but you'll see for folks that are close to it in the bottom right, the ledger down there is showing you the different types of responses with little circles with colors in them, color coordinated to that ledger. So you'll see kind of fire is a yellow and like a gas leak is green, but it's all very, very tiny. Because some of the responses were all condensed in a very tight spot. The GIS map overlay work person also put cigar burns, cigarette burns to kind of show the volume and the concentration of it. So you'll see some spots where it's flared out to like yellow and such, and that's just indicating a volume or a concentration. That's not like a massive fire that happened on the east end of town or something like that. It's just showing the concentration of our spots. And so again, you're seeing a lot of different spots as responses are certainly correlates with people where they're at in the district. And so with all this types of data and the availability of the space that the city had to it at the time of coming out of the study, we evaluated 3 main areas. We evaluated the existing site on East Main and quickly arrived at that it's too small. The 6 bays needed for the current apparatuses does not fit on the existing parcel on the top left there. We then looked at the Armory facility on Water Street. And again, it kind of arrived at this is too small as well. It would need a 3-story solution, and it has challenges with parking as well as stormwater that runs through that area. And then concerns with site safety and on where responder parking would have to be in relationship to where the bays and other elements are. And then the space between Adams and Lewis Street, the O.E. Gray school site was also evaluated. And this kind of proved to be the most opportunity out of those 3 sites. It has room for growth, but it was also identified as certainly having to account for some slope in that area as the contour runs downhill from the front side of Adams to the north side of Lewis. With this kind of an assessment and this data coming back, the city decided to move forward and begin design, and we brought in Wendell 5 Bugles to kick off a project and follow a timeline that roughly followed this, getting extended a little bit. The end of that kind of pushed into, I believe, like April-ish of 2023, but in hitting these benchmarks. While we were evaluating the different opportunities on the O.E. Gray, one of the first opportunities that was evaluated was a renovation of the of the existing school there. So the concept was brought forward of, can we reconfigure that, put a bay on it, and make it equal a fire station? Through that exercise, we realized that the school is in fact not meant to be an emergency response building. There was a lot of space, but the space wasn't necessarily in the right spots. Using the hallway configurations existing there also proved a challenge for operational purposes. And so the overall assessment is that it would require significant demolition and reconstruction, and kind of having an etch-a-sketch on OE Gray was seen as most preferable. Then a series of multiple different models were explored with a two-story type of a design concept. They looked initially at trying to capture some of the topography on having entrance, ground level entrance off of a basement floor, and ground level entrance off of an Adams Street, and looked at different places to position it on the parcel. And there was multiple models that were explored in trying to arrive at a solution on OE Gray. At the same time, through the efforts of some amazing folks here at the city, and with support from our state and federal legislators and all kinds of folks that helped us with this, as well as partners in town writing letters of support, we were given notification of an appropriation of federal congressionally directed funds of $7 million. And then we also brought in a construction manager, arriving through a bid process through our RFP process, arriving at Kramer Brothers. In bringing in the construction manager, we had a little bit clearer vision of what some of the civil work was going to be in order to accomplish the project. So we had a little bit clear understanding of the engineer, as well as some of the material costs and inflations. And then at this time, we also became aware of a kind of a property line discrepancy as we surveyed the plot. And how that kind of impacted was, if you're familiar with the driveway that goes into OE Gray, the fence on that driveway on the west side is edged over and actually encroaches into the existing parcel, because the original alleyway is kind of only the east side of what is Highway 81 there. So we became aware of that small change in expectations, if you will. As many of you were here on the evening of April 20th, we had our schematic design presentation, or our concept design presentation, brought forward from Wendell 5 Bugles, and then also the Kramer Brothers. The solution, it fit on the build site. It offered a 7 drive-through bays, decontamination, admin offices, 60-person training room, storage, kitchen, EOC space, and future expansion for a dormitories, essentially a second floor that was shelled. It came at a cost of what was estimated at $15,475,000 based on square footage. And it also had several different features or alternate bids that could be included into it or reduced from it. In taking that design and kind of talking with our folks here on the city end, we asked them to slim down that 2-story schematic to get kind of in a price point down about $3 million. So bringing it from a 15.4 down to a 12.5. And that was based on the assumption of knowing that we had $7 million in appropriations. That put an obligation on the city of borrowing approximately $3 million. It put our town's partners in an obligation of borrowing approximately $1 million. And then that also left about $1.5 million that, in dealing with our fundraising partners, they felt that they could potentially raise that much in funds here with local support. But in our efforts of doing that, how this was all kind of slimmed down was really based on square footage reductions to fit a price point. So all the different features and functions of those rooms, of the gear room, the PPE lockers, watch room, et cetera, was all condensed down again to meet a price point. And there's concerns on, well, how much functionality are we going to be losing if we compress those spaces that small? At this time, it was also brought up of, well, is there a way to reduce additional costs, try to save some of the those features of the size of those rooms by bringing it down all into 1 story? And so not quite a backup and restart, but more of a set of, okay, let's try to figure this out then. We arrived at working with our design team on, can you bring forward 4 main concepts then for our different partners to evaluate? And the 4 main concepts are the 2-story slimmed, which we just kind of addressed in broad strokes, a single-story design that fits on the parcel being OE Gray, a single-story design that fits with the acquisition of the adjacent blighted parcels next to it, like an expanded OE gray, and then a concept of a single-story design that can be placed out in the industrial park. And the thought there is that you'll get a bigger sandbox and have less restrictions and less civil work to be able to engage in. So maybe we get more for our money. And then we also asked, though, for the alternate of a basement space and a seventh apparatus bay to be featured as options for all four of those basic concept designs. So then in very broad strokes now, you're looking at the first option. This is the first option of your considerations that yourselves and your partners are going to have to decide on, is the two-story slim design that fits on the parcels. On a broad kind of an assessment of this parcel, you're looking at improvement of base space in comparison to the existing facilities. It fits on OE Gray site. There is an egress out onto Adams Street. It's east of the corner on Highway 81. It doesn't allow for future occupancy without added on money, because this design and the price point essentially has the second floor shelved and unfinished. So we don't have dormitories to have overnight or long stays or facilitating for full-time responders. The multiple story also includes the need for an elevator and stairwell costs to be in compliance with a public building. And the spaces have been slim to meet a cost point. So again, the functionality impacts probably have been underappreciated on what those rooms are going to look like being compressed. We're also potentially having some storage room impacts because it is getting slimmed down. And again, the second floor is not built out. So putting this in a realm of kind of to tee up for a matrix kind of decision, the overall space of this design is at 26.5 thousand square feet, if you will. And that it's reaching about 83.2% of the assessed need of 31,900 that we had in our assessed need at the onset of this with the study. The response to this facility is optimal, as it's still located kind of in the center of our volunteer response, in the center of where we're seeing most of our fire district responses out. Egress is onto Adams Streets. The growth opportunity is limited, but there's some opportunity for growth with consideration again for the slopes and the initial placement of where it goes onto that parcel. So overall, the pros is it fits on the parcel. It has improved circulation over the existing facility for movement throughout the building. It has good separation between the public and private space that allows for public parking and entry off of Adams Street. There's multiple levels, requires an elevator stairs, is kind of seen as a con to this though, because that's going to incur more costs. We have some lost storage space in consideration for our existing building. And again, the reduced rooms, there's potential for some significant kind of impacts on functions. And the second floor with this price point is not built out. So the cost, the base bid on this is $12,482,145. And again, this is
12 million.
I'm sorry, 12 million. Yes, 12 million. Thank you. It's made out of more than cardboard. So yes, 12,482,145. And then to add the additional features, again, based on square footage, to add that seventh bay for functionality is 398,000 and change. And the added cost of putting a basement underneath it is about 2.6 million. And Chief, these folks have probably listened to my nasal monotone voice for quite a while. Is there any other features that you want to talk about on this first slimmed one to bring it to their attention? Sorry, I didn't mean to make this a
Ken has a question.
little bit of.
Ken?
On this page, you talk about the second floor. What are you calling the second floor, the basement?
No, that is a full second story that was designed for the dorms and the day room living space for
But we were
folks to
talking
be
about
on
a
site.
single floor.
No, it's a two-story, right here. It's a two-story building that has an elevator. So this is one floor. This is the second floor that fits on top, right here. This piece right here.
I'm going back, you talked about a single floor.
Those will come up here shortly.
Just a minute. The first option
Two-story, here's
is a
two-story.
two-story. So that's what we're talking about. The first option is a two-story.
Or here it says, single-story design that fits on the
But
parcel.
that's the second. We're now talking just about this one. So there are 4 concepts. We've just heard concept number 1, the
Okay.
2-story. Now we're going to go to concept number 2.
We're good.
Okay. And so the second one now is a single story design that fits on the parcel. Again, this fits on the OE parcel. Some of the features and
And-
broad,
Advance your slide, please.
oh, yes, thank you, thank you. Okay, there we go.
But
Um,
again, if this is a single story, there's also a basement, or you're not talking about it.
That's an added feature that can be in addition to all 4 of these options tonight, Ken, is that you can put a basement under it. It costs about $2.5 million.
So you're going down there, single story, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
You could put a basement underneath, and so that's another floor.
That's a basement.
Yes, essentially a basement would be a underground, lower level, extra floor. Correct. It's not included in any of the base bids. It's an alternate on all of them.
Okay? Let's do it. I just want to be clear what you're talking about.
Okay, so in broad strokes, then the features is this one fits on the parcel. It has egress out of the bays onto Adams Street, like the previous. It allows for future full-time occupancy. In pulling the second floor down, it was thought that, well, it's going to add cost, but let's see what it looks like to build then those dormitories out to allow for potential full-time responder occupancy. The thing is, with a single story design, it has no elevator. So that is a reduction in costs. But you can see that this one snugs up very much against Court Street, and there is no off-street public parking. We do have some off-street responder parking that you'll see coming off of Lewis Street as is concept designed right now, but there is no public parking. It would have to be along Court Adams adjoining streets. In putting this on a matrix again, this one's a little bit bigger now. You're at 29,164 square feet, which is getting you to approximately 91.4% of the assessed need. In response, the facility again is an optimal location for volunteer responses in the center of the fire district. Egress is onto Adams Street. Growth opportunity is limited. Growth may likely be an outbuilding or modification to responder parking with consideration for the slope. I think it's probably important to point out too. So in order to, let me back up here, in order to try to reduce costs on civil engineering work, the building is brought up to the south side of this parcel where there is less slope. So the further, if we went back and tried to do different angled driveways, it would result in more retention walls and things of that nature. So in trying to reduce cost, it's edged up here in the front or in the south side of the parcel. So the pros is it does fit on the parcel. The admin is connected to the garage and the washroom, which is seen as a bonus. It does not require an elevator or added stairs in comparison to the previous option. The cons are the parking lot and entry is less than optimal. You're again not going to have off-street parking. The 7th apparatus bay may not fit as an option in this because again, the parcel lines off the east with the adjacent properties are very, very snug. And once civil engineering is kind of actually done and, you know, just dropping a concept picture on there, but actually surveying it out and scoping it all out, it may not fit that 7th bay. The cost of this one comes at $13,391,071. The added bay, again, is the same cost based on the square footage as well as the basement. Okay, so now moving into our third type of design, we have a single story, and this one is showing a fit on an extended OE gray or onto the adjacent parcels. And this would require the adjacent land as the immediate notice of this. The egress, there would be a egress, you'd be sliding into the west, so egress out of those bays would be visualized as coming out right onto Highway 81, which is seen as safety and response improvement in comparison to the previous two. You'll have more visibility of responders again coming out in trucks. It allows for future full-time occupancy because again, this price point is built with the dormitories built out. It is a single story, so in comparison to the double story one, there would be no elevator costs. It allows for off-street parking. As you can see, with it being snugged over, it does allow for some public street parking off of Court Street. And it has additional responder off-street parking as well. Kind of looking at this on a matrix then, you're at a little less square footage than the last one, but you're still at 90.5% of the assessed need. The facility is optimally located in the for volunteer response in the center of the district and has optimal egress out on Highway 81 in comparison to the previous two. The growth opportunity is limited. Growth may likely again be an outbuilding or modification to a responder parking lot with consideration for slopes. The pros is you have safer egress and visibility onto Highway 81 in comparison to the previous two. Anticipated space for the 7th bay pending civil. There's a room for off-street parking. Like the previous, the admin is connected to the watchroom and support garage. There's additional storage space, living quarters built out, and best operational flow in comparison to the previous one story. The cons requires property acquisition. It has limited growth, future growth with consideration for slope again. And the cost price on this at base bid is estimated at $13,265,980,000 with the same added on costs if we're considering adding that 7th bay or a basement underneath.
Plus land acquisition.
Plus land acquisition and any possible surveying and different works that would go along with evaluating those properties.
Light green, it's kind of a faded color at the far left. That's the potential 7th.
Yes, on the top schematic there. It's showing your apparatus bay with the fleet trucks in there, and what it looks like that the rectangle on the far left is the 7th bay added. That is correct.
Question for Chief Simmons. How essential is the 7th bay? Because I know well, some of these said
Right.
might not be able
So
to happen.
6 bays is basically space for everything our apparatus now, with more space in between them, not necessarily loaded by operational functionality, but again, to organize them to fit into those spaces. The 7th bay allows either space where we can have apparatus if it's being serviced because they are stacked. If we're working on one and we can't get the one out behind it, becomes a problem. So it allows us to have a space to either be servicing on one or adjust the operational flow so that we don't have to still move a apparatus to get the one out behind it that we need. Just because they're pull through doesn't necessarily mean that with 6 bays, we can fully stack everything the way that it needs to operationally respond. So the thing with it is it allows you for all that future expansion. And at $400,000, you'll never build that space for $400,000 again. So I mean, that space becomes more and more expensive and maybe not possible in the future.
Sounds pretty essential.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So now moving into the 4th design, it's taking a single story, the same basic building design that we just looked at for an expanded OE gray, and it's placing it out in the industrial park off of Vision Drive. So you'll see a little bit of a blow up there of what it looks like. A lot of the same building features then kind of remain in place. The main differences then is, of course, you retain the same type of a thing if it's a single story, so there's no elevator cost. Out in the industrial park, though, you're going to have certainly more space to grow if the building has to grow in east, north, south, and depending on how far from the road it is, a south manor, you're going to have optimal space. The downside, most obviously, becomes the longer distance for the time for responders, both volunteers coming to the facility and in following the data that we have responding back out to reports or to calls. And another downside of consideration is that it will utilize development district. We are trying to promote growth out there, and that is a less taxable space that is out there. And this is kind of the breakdown then. So you're looking at the same building size, so you're meeting 90.5. As we talked about, the response time adds volunteer response and adds about to about 70% of our population, it would increase the response time. However, you're going to have optimal room for growth. Pros is you're going to have availability for expansion. The parcel will need less civil work, including there will not be a need for demolition on OE Gray. It has the same features of connecting the watch room to the support garage as well as additional storage. The cons is, as we talked about, the time for response. It does take space from economic development, and it could have potential impacts then on the ISO rating as well as FEMA grants. But the overall cost is coming in significantly with the idea of less civil work at $19,592,475.
12 million.
What did I say?
19.
How did I get 19 out of that? It's a good thing you guys are here.
Huh.
19,592,475.
Did you just say
He
19?
Did I say it again?
You did.
12.5. It'll come in at a little over 12.5.
You don't like that option.
I think you need some water or something.
Oh, sorry. Too many numbers today. 12.6. Okay. And yes, there are many, in talking about the placement on it too, we've had conversations with chiefs. We've talked with 2 different chiefs that gave anecdotally situations of towns that built in their industrial park expecting growth to go out there, and then finding out that in fact the city grew the other way and they're responding out further from city center to a site and coming back. At the same time, I don't have a magic 8 ball, but it appears from our TID efforts though, that we are in fact trying to promote growth on that side of town closer to our main corridor of commerce and our gateway to our other communities. So there are consideration points there as well. Moving in then now past our 4 major features, we talk about then the alternate bids, and what would we be gaining from the alternate bids? A basement space. We have room for future expansion opportunities and storage. We have future partnership opportunities. We have a potential for shelter space in the realm of disasters and such. With the 7th bay added, as Chief mentioned, it's space for future apparatus needs. It allows for more flexibility in apparatus layouts. And that's kind of in regards to responses. I don't know if Chief, if you want to expand on having the different abilities to put different pieces in different places.
Well, with us covering both city and rural areas, we have to use different types of apparatuses. Rurally, they don't have hydrants to supply water source to them, so we use tenders and we take the water with us, and then there's some other specialty type equipment that you might use, UTVs, brush trucks for off-road type fires and stuff like that. So not everything goes to every type of incident that we have. So as it is now, we have to move vehicles to get to another vehicle that we need to use, because vehicles are basically placed in the current station by how they fit, not by how they should functionally respond. So that's our concern with 6 bays, is we've taken our problem, just spread the problem out to put more space between the trucks, as we haven't, addressed that type of issue.
The graphic, the blue graphic there shows the 6 bay space with the entire fleet kind of in there, and it does fit. And part of it is, in all fairness, 2 of the smaller vehicles could fit in the support garage, right? So there, there's 2 small vehicles. The tinier triangles could be, or rectangles could be taken out of that square to get a true assessment of what it would look like. So overall then too, with the need for more basement space, again, their future partnerships is we have more and more pressure from state and budget cuts to try to consolidate operations and such that would provide potentially future partnerships with whether it's county or state level types of supports, and have build out space. So then we took this, the concepts to our, a couple different fire chiefs that had recently gone through a build or considering a build or recently built, and asked them to kind of give some feedback on what they thought. A lot of the consistent feedback arrived at some of these talking points of, it's maybe not a matter of if you're going to need 24/7 staffing, but probably a matter so of when you're going to need it, and whether that happens in a 5-year window, 10-year window, 30-year window is yet to be seen. Very, very fortunate for the responders that we have right now. Building flow, it recommended that you build the facility with the understanding that your responders in for voluntary purposes are trying to get to their locker as soon as they can at the shortest possible distance. As well as if you can afford an extra bay, try to do it now. It allows for more training and maintenance. If you can't get enough storage space, it fills up fast. And they also recommended kind of on a more technical level, when you do have storage space, visualize and plan what that shelving is going to look like for that space and how it's going to operate. They recommended the current designs all call for an in-floor heating system. And they recommended with dual doors to keep that in place, because opening up both doors, all the hot air blows out, and then trying to reheat that space with just forced air becomes a problem. So if you can have the cement underneath it warm, it helps heat it quicker. They recommended if you're on the OE Gray site, it would be more optimal to egress onto the Highway 181 would be safer than Adams, as well as then they again said location, follow the responder data, and then safety, consider truck egress in relationship to your responder parking was another point that we had talked on in length. So then we kind of have this scorecard broken out. It's a very busy matrix, but it's trying to take all the very broad talking points and kind of try to build a decision matrix here. And this is what we intend to kind of take out to the townships and again, get their feedback on a slim 2-story, 1-story that fits, a 1-story expanded, and a 1-story industrial park, the sizes, and then the percentage as it relates to the assessed need for size is the second column. Broke it down then to kind of trying to get again, kind of a little bit of a subjective view, or I'm sorry, a subjective view on the public safety and response out, assessing what they look like in comparison with each other, as well as then as a volunteer safety perspective. And then a best guess or a best opinion on growth, availability, and function longevity. And then we have kind of the big hitters on what we thought were the pros and the cons of each model design, and then the laid out estimated bid costs or base costs with the bays and the basements. The decision point then on how it impacts our partners from a borrowing sense, underneath the premise that we have $7 million coming in appropriations and 1.5 million coming in through fundraising, trying to reach a project target of 12.5 puts about $3 million of burden on Platteville and a remaining $1 million on our townships. If we increase that to a $13 million project, then we're at about 3.5 for Platteville, and 1.5, what would that be? Then 1.5 or so or for the townships. And then we get to a 13.5, then we're at a $3.8 million borrowing burden for the city. Decision point then on timeline. This is kind of what it looks out. Again, a disclaimer that all the financials are estimates based on square footage of the concept and the best guess of civil work costs at the time. Estimates may change with schematic development and markets at the time of the bidding. But a timeline, if we can continue moving on this, we want to get out to our partners in August and September, get their ideas and bring their ideas back to you with a recommendation in September. We approve a concept design, hopefully in September. We reach then a schematic design phase of about 2 months. Partner presentations at the end of the schematic design. There could be multiple touch points involved with that. If we can arrive then at a schematic, we get into design development of approximately another 2 months. All things working out, then we're going to set our GMP, which is our guaranteed maximum price with our contractor, and then finalize hopefully financing in around May or prior to. Construction documents then go out for 2 months, as well as then a release for our bidding in summer, fall of 2024. And then if all things continue on that track, we have construction start in fall of 2024. Madam President, that was a lot, and it was all in a mumbled monotone voice. So we will entertain all questions that you might have.
Questions?
You're gonna send this out early to them to read over?
To the townships, yes, I'll be working with Colette tomorrow to schedule. to get documents out to townships, as well as them encouraging them to watch the video of the presentation here tonight, so they could be readied with questions when we engage with them. Some of them mentioned the desire to have a special township meeting versus in their, their usual monthly meeting, and we'll defer to them on when it's good to come and visit them.
So this has been recorded tonight, and Jody will be posting it, I guess, twice. Once it will be posted as a part of the meeting, but then it will be posted as a separate fire facility presentation. So people don't have to bring up the meeting and go to the 37th minute or however you do that. So they can just bring up the presentation. And Clint will be letting the townships know that they can access that link so that they can see it. Plus, the PowerPoint is here. So if they had the PowerPoint in the follow through.
Yep.
And then we'll take questions.
Yes, and I mean, the context of it too is I'm going to be asking them for a recommendation to myself, and then gathering their recommendations on hopefully kind of a scorecard that looks like this, and then coming to you folks with a based on our partners and where we think the preferences lie. This would be the recommendation brought forward for your consideration.
Questions?
I just have a concern. I understand that when we have to go through and pull out some stuff that you really don't, but I don't need or whatever, but changing the feel of the reason why we were changing the fire department, because I know when I went in there for the very first time, all I kept thinking was, wow, this is too small. Wow, how are they doing this, right? And so if the 7th bay is really what, like it's almost like we need the walls to stand up. If it's gonna be what we need to benefit and to grow and to do what we want to do, I really would like, I personally will be pushing that. However, whatever schematic we come up with would include. Since to me, for us to just relocate if it's not going to be beneficial in the long term. You feel what I'm saying? I know it's gonna cost the money that, it's gonna cost, but.
Brian, can you tell us how much floor space you have right now for trucks?
How much the existing?
The existing floor space that you have your trucks parked on,
It's in about 8,000 square foot space.
and the 6 bays, 7, each bay is how much?
For,
1,800?
The square footage. It's
Okay.
about in the new facility, they're about 1,800, 1,775.
So right now, your so you'd be tripling with 6 bays? Your current is what?
Current's right around 8,000 square feet.
On to almost 11,000 with 6 bays.
Yeah, they're roughly 14, well, they're 14-foot wide doors with 3-foot-4 in between each of the garage doors. So there's more, like I say, there's more space in the bays between the trucks. It doesn't, the 7th bay allows you to, like say, do more training, maintenance stuff, as well as adjust your layout of responding vehicles by priority and not necessarily stacking trucks just to fit them in the space.
Yeah.
Like we're doing now.
Right, that's one point.
And I appreciate, I appreciate the insight on it. My mind is in turmoil on this. I look at some of the projects that you folks have done historically, like with your water waste treatment plant and making sure that you put a solution in place that's going to last many generations, as well as a recent, say, fire, your police station, another great example, and things of that nature. At the same time, too, on balancing that with, we had a presentation tonight on understanding that we have a very, very big list of wants and needs on other different departments, and what we're kind of calling a CIP plan, for transparency's sake, is probably more so a a quantified list of the many different deficiencies that we have needs or wants or desires for, and pushing a lot of it down the road. So we're gonna have to, we'll have to find a balance on what that is, and that decision hopefully comes down to you folks to be able to gauge on where the needs and wants and desires all fall.
I have a question about CIP. Administration turned in items 1, 2, 3, community development 4 through 7, police 8 to 17, public works 18 to 104, and then 105 to 171. Was there any discussion among or between the departments and the city manager as far as which of these would be accepted by the city manager? Or was there no discussion as far as what these are simply the ones and that's it, and how are we going to figure it out? That's what I'd like to know, because are we just going to be shooting in the dark and looking at their wants, or have they cut down their wants to find out really what might go as far as being accepted by the council?
I'll start at it and then I'll defer to Nicola. So with the sheets that you're going to see rating types of schemes that try to capture priority and purpose. That's trying to put evaluation of how urgent the need is to get it in place, as well as understanding then what the funding sources for it. So with those elements in place and understanding that it certainly resides in objectivities of what you think is most important versus what Bob thinks is more important versus what we think is most important, we have to arrive at a solution for all of it. So that being said, like the details on it and the conversations that we had, Nicola could probably best describe on how we walk and talk through the process.
Absolutely. So if we think back a few years, we had a 5-year CIP, but the later years did not really capture everything that were desired or needed for those later years. It's just been a few years since we had that kind of a plan. And in 2021, we pivoted to a more comprehensive plan that tried to capture all of the opportunities, needs, and wants, desires, but that then would need to be refined as we went into budget. As Clint identified, on a detailed page, you could flip to any page that you so chose, but on the detailed page, in the right-hand corner, you have the division identified, the contact person, the director of the department, the type, and then there is also a priority, which we talked about earlier, and a purpose, which also has a category or a number assigned to it. And so those will be helpful as we go through the budget process to identify what are the priorities overall. Of course, each director has a priority for their department, but we then have to look at that in light of the entire budget and the city as a whole, and identify those things that have to rise to the top, critical and mandated projects, and then other things that we would love to be able to do, but perhaps won't be able to consider for 2024.
So that process has not been done.
That has not started as of yet. And that will be something that will be coming to, there'll be a special session of the council to review the proposed CIP budget. I think what we would like to do is bring forward recommendations, but with some alternatives so that the council could consider, this approach or that approach. I also mentioned towards the beginning of my presentation that we do see that this tool is under development to some degree. It's difficult when there's later years with very large amounts that are not realistic. And this plan does form the foundation for our financial management plan or our long range plan. And so that also kind of makes it difficult to use this as a tool for that plan if there are unrealistic funding in later years. So we'll be working to try to try to capture these opposing needs. One is a plan that shows everything that we'd like to do, but another is a plan that is realistic in what the city has in its ability to fund. One thing that we have done in certain cases is say, we'd like to do this project, Water Street. It's going to cost 12 or $13 million. We don't know how we would fund that. So we're going to put it in the project plan, but we're going to show it being funded by a potential grant. That's a way to kind of bridge that gap. But we're continuing to refine this plan as we go through the years.
Okay, my next question is, what's gonna be the layout, the setup as far as the council and the director, staff, as far as we interacting with you, because we have also Joe Carroll, we have the library director as well, and who else? All these people. So you're gonna be, who's gonna control this whole people, and who's gonna keep them from talking up and taking the turn of somebody else?
I believe the city manager will be responsible for that, since all of the positions that we have report to the city manager.
Because
The city manager is our manager, and I'm sure that he will manage the budget discussions and the timing of the various people involved in making presentations relative to the budget discussions.
When we enter into the workshop types of setting, yes, as well as we'll be having many discussions prior to that on our end. So
you're gonna manage it.
that would be what you're paying me for,
Okay.
Ken, yeah. Yeah.
I believe in my memories, we used to have the city manager making recommendations himself or herself about a particular item.
And,
I-
and that's likely going to be the
do-
case.
Do you anticipate doing that yourself?
Our vision would be that I'm going to walk up to you folks on, this is the proposal baseline, as well as some different options. If you are feeling very, there's a lot of political desire for project A, then maybe it's on there, but then we're gonna have to have balance with it. So then maybe G and F are gonna have to come off to balance on a price point, and to try to be able to present that to you folks, where it's still, here's the baseline of where I think 7 people may agree on, but if we have projects that are also, in the gray on where we recommend, then they're brought forward as if you want it to fit, okay, but what comes off?
Well, I went through practically all of these. There's a lot of things listed, and so, for example, Public Works, you go from 18 to 171. But that includes all the years.
I think our main focus in the workshop is going to be arrive at what 2024 is going to look like. Yeah. Yeah.
What has been said, if anything, about 2024?
I think that's what they're working on right now, the 2024 budget, both the capital improvement budget and the operational budget.
Correct.
Because there are two, basically, we'll have two, but to approve the capital improvement and then the operational.
Yes, and the capital improvement budget review session is scheduled for Tuesday, the 3rd of October. It's a special session. Anticipate that will be held in the police department training room, which is where we usually have our special budget sessions.
Okay, other questions?
I have a question that I guess is more for me. I think the other council members probably know the answer, but it's about how much debt we can incur. And like Lynn was saying, one of the reasons we're getting a new fire station is because we probably need that 7th bay. And, one of the options here is already $1 million beyond the 12.5. And then you tack on the basement and, the extra bay, it's adding another like $2.5 million. And Nicola, one thing that you had said earlier is that there's a state imposed I guess, limit on our debt of 5%, but we have our own internal limit of 3.5%.
That's correct.
So we're not even close to the state imposed. We just follow our own, the 3.5.
Yes, you know, the 3.5% is more restrictive than the state's
Oh, yeah.
limit. Yes.
But how close are we to that?
That's a great question. I'm just rapidly here trying to pull up what we have for equalized value and give you that number. So our equalized value for 2023 is 978,216,000. If I plug that into my calculator here, 1 second, 978, 216, 600. Okay, and we multiply that. Did you want the state limit or the internal?
Well, I
limit?
was just wondering, like, if we are close enough to that, that the adding the basement and the seventh bay and adding another $2.5 million to what
Yeah.
we've planned is even feasible, or if
It is feasible from a debt limit capacity standpoint. If my numbers are correct, and don't hold me to this, but it looks like our internally opposed limit would be about 34 million. And I think we're currently sitting right around 20 million in terms of total outstanding general obligation debt. So we have capacity in terms of a debt limit, but where we find more of a challenge is we have to repay the debt and we have to raise taxes in order to afford the principal and interest payments on that debt. So that's where we find ourselves constrained. How much can we afford to burden the taxpayer in terms of repayment of the debt?
thank you.
Nicola, are we limited to a 20-year borrow also? Is that right?
I believe that is correct,
Yeah.
yes.
So whatever we borrow, we have to repay
in
within
20 years.
20 years. I mean, I know that, for instance, home mortgages now used to be 20 or 25. Now they've gone to 30, 35, 40 because of the increased costs of borrowing and trying to level out that payment. I'm not sure that's an option that we can exercise. Ken?
The current fire station, what is the approximate value, if you know what the value is or have taken it?
It hasn't been appraised right now. I would say based off of a few just rough estimates, some folks have said maybe 350,000
350,000.
potential.
So do you see that as something that could be put toward the debt for the new fire station?
That is up to you as a council to determine what you do with that old facility when it's vacated. If you choose to sell it and use those funds towards it, you can. If you choose to repurpose it, you can. If you choose to use it as a developer incentive for someone that wants to put an RFP and build a $2 million complex there and you give them the land, that's up to you. So
Now we have one additional housing structure there. Is that correct? Just one?
correct, 60 Ellen Street.
Yeah.
And that will be sold.
That you say that will be sold
That will be sold.
together with the fire station or separate?
It's a separate
Don't know.
parcel, so it'd just be a separate.
Okay, any questions? I suggest that if you do have questions, particularly on any of these, that you contact Clint and or Ryan to talk through your questions or any suggestions. One thing Clint didn't mention tonight was a couple of the single-story designs do include a mezzanine, which is a smaller second story that's not really a second story, but it's a storage space. By law, if the mezzanine is of a certain size, It's not really considered to be a second story, so you don't really have to put the elevator and stuff in. So it's kind of, but there are a couple of these do include the mezzanine on the second story for storage. So I did want to point that out because we talked about the decrease in storage, but there is some storage built into these.
Correct. I think those ones,
And I think they all
talked
have
about
the system.
additional, that was one of the pros of them is additional storage space
And that is that little weird.
and I can give you
Thank
those
you.
rough numbers too, if you want exactly what those rough square footage of just storage room spaces between those different concepts, if you.
So, for instance, the one that Clint has add up.
Yeah, so the difference is, so right now in our existing building in storage rooms, we have roughly 1,024 square feet of storage. In the first option, the slimmed two-story option, as it sits with what's proposed there, has 927 square foot of storage, so we actually lose storage space, which doesn't resolve we have no storage space now. The other two single-story options have roughly 3,000 square foot of storage space, so they're an increase 3 times of what we currently have.
Okay, folks, well, that is the fire facility concepts. You heard the plan, the timeline. And Clint and Ryan will be meeting with our partners. The last page showed as the price increases for us, it increases for others. So that's also a consideration that they will be talking about since we all have a stake in this. Okay, that's it for tonight. So unless somebody has something else, I think we could take a motion for adjournment and you can all return to the heat of the outside. It's been very nice in here and we certainly hope that Todd is doing well tonight. He got called into work because the air conditioner at the place that he worked went down. Not a good thing to have happen tonight. So do I have a motion for adjourn? Okay, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Lynn to adjourn. Jody, we'll vote. Are you taking the vote?
Actually, I'm taking the vote.
Oh, Nicola, we'll vote.
And I don't know what order I'm supposed to do this.
Just
so
take it,
I will
or we'll
take
just
it
say
from the-
all in favor, say
All
aye.
in favor, say aye.
Any
All
opposed?
right, thank you. very much.
Okay, we got that done.
I'm curious.